AP News Summary at 2:27 p.m. EDT Israeli airstrikes level apartments in Gaza refugee camp, as ground troops battle Hamas militants. YOUNIS, Gaza Strip, AP. A flurry of Israeli airstrikes on a refugee camp near Gaza City leveled apartment buildings, leaving craters where they once stood, as ground troops battled Hamas militants across northern Gaza and attacked underground compounds. Buoyed by the first successful rescue of a captive held by Hamas, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected calls for a ceasefire and again vowed to crush Hamas' ability to govern Gaza or threaten Israel following its bloody October 7 rampage. That attack ignited the war. More than half the territory's 2.3 million Palestinians have fled their homes, with hundreds of thousands sheltering in packed UN-run schools turned shelters or in hospitals alongside thousands of wounded patients. The Supreme Court wrestles with social media cases that have echoes of Donald Trump. Time equals 400 ms. greater than Washington, AP. The Supreme Court is wrestling with whether public officials can block critics from commenting on their social media accounts. The issue first arose in a case involving former President Donald Trump. The justices heard arguments Tuesday in two cases involving lawsuits filed by people who were blocked after leaving critical comments on social media accounts belonging to school board members in Southern California and a city manager in Port Huron, Michigan, northeast of Detroit. The cases force the court to deal with the competing free speech rights of public officials and their constituents, and all in a rapidly evolving virtual world. It was not clear where the court would land. Time equals 400 ms. greater than U.S. military and diplomatic leaders urge a divided Congress to send aid to both Israel and Ukraine. Washington, AP. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and Secretary of State Antony Blinken are urging an increasingly divided Congress to immediately send major aid to both Israel and Ukraine. They said at a Senate hearing on Tuesday that in addition to helping the two countries in their fights against Hamas and Russia, broad support for the foreign aid would send a vital signal of strength to U.S. adversaries worldwide. The leader's testimony comes as the administration's massive $105 billion emergency aid request for conflicts in those countries and others has hit roadblocks. There is bipartisan support in the Democratic-led Senate for sending aid to both countries, but in the Republican-led House, new Speaker Mike Johnson has proposed focusing on Israel alone. Two pastors worry for their congregants' safety. Are more guns the answer or the problem? Niagara Falls, NY, AP. Two pastors are each worried for their congregants' safety. One believes the right to bear arms undermines the freedom to worship in peace. The other believes that the right to carry a gun is an essential means of protecting fragile religious liberty. As the Supreme Court has adopted an increasingly expansive interpretation of the Second Amendment, the right to guns is casting a shadow over many other freedoms Americans hold dear. That tension is becoming visceral in some houses of worship because, more and more, they feel like targets. Kids return to school, plan to trick or treat as Maine communities start to heal from mass shooting. Lewiston, Maine, AP. Children have returned to school and plan to go trick or treating in Lewiston, Maine, after the deadliest mass shooting in the state's history. Area residents spent days locked in their homes last week while police searched for the man who fatally shot 18 people at a bowling alley and a bar. He was found dead on Friday. On Tuesday, hundreds of students returned to a high school that was recently transformed into a law enforcement command post. Inside, students petted therapy dogs and were signing a large banner that read, "Lewiston Strong," the community's new motto. Does January 6 constitutionally block Trump from 2024 ballot? Lawyers to make case on day 2 of hearing. Denver, AP. Lawyers on day 2 of a hearing in Colorado will argue whether the infamous events of January 6, 2021 constitute an insurrection under a clause of the U.S. Constitution that they are trying to use to disqualify former President Donald Trump from the 2024 presidential ballot. The hearing in Colorado is one of two this week, with the second before the Minnesota Supreme Court on Thursday, that could end up before the U.S. Supreme Court, which has never before ruled on the Civil War-era provision in the 14th Amendment. Tuesday's witnesses are expected to include an expert in right-wing violence and an expert on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which has only been used a handful of times since it was adopted in 1868. Group seeks to clear names of all accused, convicted or executed for witchcraft in Massachusetts. Boston, AP. Massachusetts is working to fully atone for its witch trial legacy nearly 400 years after the first person was executed there for witchcraft. The latest push comes from a group dedicated to clearing the names of all those accused, arrested or indicted for witchcraft in the state. This is whether or not the accusations ended in death. Hundreds of individuals were accused of witchcraft in Massachusetts, home of the infamous Salem witch trials, between 1638 and 1693. Most escaped execution but have yet to have their names formally cleared by lawmakers. Cutting-edge AI raises fears about risks to humanity. Are tech and political leaders doing enough? London, AP. Chatbots like ChatGPT wowed with their ability to do tasks as good as or better than humans, thanks to cutting-edge artificial intelligence systems. Now, frontier AI has become the latest buzzword as concerns grow that the emerging technology has capabilities that could endanger humanity. Everyone from the British government to top researchers and even major AI companies themselves are raising the alarm about frontier AI's as yet unknown dangers and calling for safeguards. The debate comes to a head Wednesday at a summit focused on frontier AI. Sofia Coppola turns her lens on an American icon, Priscilla Presley. Time equals 400 Ms. Greater than Sofia Coppola learned a long time ago that in order to have full creative freedom, she'd have to get creative with budgets and timelines. Though to look at her latest film, Priscilla, a continent and decade-spanning portrait of Priscilla Presley's life with Elvis, you wouldn't know that it was shot in 30 days, mainly in Toronto. Coppola spoke to the Associated Press about her eighth film, which has gotten her some of her best reviews since Lost in Translation, and the wave of support she's been able to witness firsthand with the release of her first book. From inventing the huddle to trying a new helmet, Gallaudet is home to a proud football tradition. Time equals 400 Ms. Greater than Washington, AP. Gallaudet University has a football tradition that dates to the late 19th century. A new helmet that helps deaf and hard of hearing players see play calls where hearing opponents can hear them is just the latest example of the team being at the center of innovation. Gallaudet invented the huddle in 1894 and has used a drum since 1970. To serve in place of a whistle, the drum has become part of the team's identity. In recent years under coach Chuck Goldstein, the Bison have also started to win more Division III games, overcoming many challenges other teams don't need to worry about.